Okay, everyone, welcome to another episode of Pastor to Pastor, and today is episode 13. And we have my good longtime friend, all the way back to the seminary days, Scott Shoffner. And so, Scott, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself and say a little bit about where you're serving?
All right, so my name's Scott Shoffner. Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate that and your time and also your friendship. So I'm serving the Downtown Baptist Church, Orlando. Downtown's a unique context. Our campus used to be the First Baptist Church of Orlando until 1985.
Yeah.
First Baptist went through explosive growth under Dr. Jim Henry, moved out to John Young and 33rd. And so after about a year or so, Dr. Henry was doing a satellite campus, and that was before satellite campuses even existed. Didn't really work out. They thought about selling it, but there was a group of people here and they wanted to stay here. They felt like there needed to be the light of Christ here in the downtown area. So First Baptist birthed downtown, and from about 86, 87 until now. So in about 7 more years, we'll come up on our 40th anniversary. So kind of a new church plant, so to speak, but maybe not. So the church was seated with about 800 to 1,000 members. Sorry, my nose. And these were established members. The church in 35 years went from, let's say, 800 down to 40.
Wow.
And the culture had changed here in downtown. People moved out, but now people are moving back in. They asked Dr. Henry, would you come back and be our interim pastor and revitalize the church? He did, and he brought back a group of people. Now, he had already retired from First Baptist back in 2006. So in 2014, he came back and brought an infusion of people here to downtown to revitalize. Some things happened, not to go into too much detail, but they tried calling one person. It didn't work out, called another person. They were here for about a month. Not to say that it was hard. There was some other circumstances in just that 1 month time with that pastor personally. And then started the search process again in January of 2019. And then I'm here. So my first Sunday was October 20th. And so coming up on a year next month, but I really won't say that it's a year. We need to take about 4 months out because of COVID. So I've only been here 8 months. I mean, it doesn't even feel like I've been here a year just because COVID has those 4 months have been whitewashed. So it's been unreal.
October, and then February hits, March hits, and there's COVID, and you're just still trying to get your feet wet. And so,
yeah, even to the point you and I had talked about one particular issue of, ministry.
Yeah.
And in regards to that, I think it was March 22nd, we were going to launch our new mission and vision for the church, to give the church a new mission and vision. And then we had to shut everything down March 15th. So I thought, okay, Lord, Yeah,
and to our First Baptist Moncks Corner people who are watching this, Scott was going to be doing our revival in the end of March. We were all excited about that, and we kind of had to pull the plug on that, but we will have him as soon as we can. That's been the most difficult thing. We are celebrating our 100th anniversary in October now, and it's going to be scaled back and 2 services and social distancing, all this kind of stuff. But we want to have a big celebration, and I had to tell our people, we don't know when that will be, because you can't set a date until we can safely sit shoulder to shoulder and breathe in each other's faces and all that kind of thing.
or give each other holy kisses, as it says in the New Testament,
Yeah, until we can do that, we can't really plan that. And so whenever we get the green light to be able to gather again in like some semblance of normal, whether it's a vaccine or whatever it is, we're just not going to be able to do that. But we will have like a Heritage Day, big celebration at some point where we actually have food and everything. But we still have to celebrate. You only get 1 year. 100 years only happens once.
Exactly, 100%.
I didn't realize that downtown had been there for 40, so that's that long older enough.
Yeah, we'll become at 40, probably 80 in 2026, 2027, something like that. So it's relatively new, so to speak. But with it doesn't really feel that new just because we were the First Baptist Church, so that goes back to like the 1800s. So.
Oh yeah, that's what you're saying. Okay. Well, we went to Disney World last summer.
I remember
with the family, and I think that might have been before you were.
It was,
and you were there, and I remember thinking to myself, "Man, this would be a great place to pastor because you got all these, it's Disney, right? And it's like, right. I mean, we have obviously Moncks Corner is wonderful and near the beach, and we love it. But I was thinking, gosh, imagine being a pastor here with all these theme parks and stuff like that, but I can also see that being a huge barrier to reaching people. I don't know what locals think about Disney World and all the parks around there. You can get into that maybe, but maybe talk a little bit about what it's like to minister in Orlando and making disciples in Orlando.
Okay, of course, Orlando is a very unique context. Gee, how do I say this but be kind? So there's a lot of alternate lifestyles down here, and we're just blocks away from where the Pulse nightclub shooting happened. I think that was in
Oh wow.
2016. So we're maybe as the crow flies, maybe 2 miles
Okay.
from Pulse nightclub.
Wow.
So that's interesting. Um,
Man.
So in regards to east of our church, that's where a lot of the subdivisions are. So you are dealing with people that you're reaching who are in an alternate lifestyle. And it doesn't just have to necessarily be homosexuality. It can be any type of alternate lifestyle.
Okay.
So it's a little bit broad. However, though, we did start last month in reaching out, going door to door, and even under COVID restrictions, people were very receptive, even to the point they said, "Hey, can you take your mask off? Can't hear you." And so Orlando is a very liberal city,
Okay.
so to speak, but it still has a lot of conservatism about it. So the way Florida works, the more south you go, the more north it is, and the more north you go in Florida, the more southern it is. We're in Central Florida, so we
Yeah.
kind of have a good mix. The one thing that I really got when I moved here that I sensed, I figured a lot of people would be closed off from wanting to have a church connection or even talking to people that they were like, that's not for me.
Yeah.
People are very receptive to hearing. They will not shut you off. So outreach, I think is easier here. One is, we live almost in God's paradise, so to speak. So people are always outdoors. Everybody's getting a good dose of vitamin D. So everybody seems to be happy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you have that.
I,
The other
I
part,
I
go ahead.
realized that too when we moved to the beach. People were nicer.
Yeah, they are. And
North
so I'm
Beach, South
about
Carolina, the same area.
you're about 30 minutes, I think, from beaches in Charleston. I'm about 50 minutes from the Atlantic and about an hour and a half from the Gulf. So
Yeah.
we usually go over to New Smyrna Beach. And but people are very receptive. Discipleship, I wish I could really give you more information on that. So right now I am discipling two guys. One is 26, one is 30. The one who is 26, both of them college graduates. The one who is 26 works for USA Networks. He works in production.
Wow.
And the one who is 30 is the senior vice president of his parents' HVAC company.
Okay.
There are a lot more at my church, white collar, which
Mhm.
I'm not, which is a breath of fresh air. The three previous churches I dealt with, let's see, you went my first church. You went there three times to preach,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
and so I've been used to blue collar, and I think your first church was probably mainly blue collar.
Yeah.
So I'm dealing with white collar. I'm dealing with medical professionals, scientists, professors from UCF, um, other professionals, people who work at the Mouse. We call that's Disney, or at Universal. I
Yeah.
don't know if we have anybody that works at SeaWorld. Um, and we also have America's Fun Spot, which is kind of like a lower version of Carowinds, which is in North Carolina in the Charlotte area. So it's been a breath of fresh air. So my guys, I'm kind of doing it off of Johnny Hunt's D101 or his D groups, but it's more video based. So we're using right now media.
Yeah.
My contacts is because we're because we are immersed in entertainment, it has to be a little bit more entertainment driven. And I don't want that to be a bad context. So it's much more video driven. They are in the word, but there's a lot of technology in it. So I've been doing that with them. During COVID, we were Zooming. The other part too with discipleship that COVID has helped on, and I was trying to figure out how am I going to do that with our new mission and vision that was going to launch back in March.
Yeah.
is because I call it the Orlando Metroplex. So Orlando is just a straw.
Oh, I lost you a little bit.
Police. Huh?
Yeah, you keep talking.
Are
You're
you
good.
still there?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So you still have the Winter Park area or Maitland or Winter Garden, all these little sub towns, but Orlando feeds them. It's just, I call it the Orlando Metroplex.
Yeah.
And so how are we going to get people to come back to the church during the week? Because it is somewhat of a drive and to also to navigate the streets down here. COVID helped with that because we have to go to Zoom. Now, my congregation is more senior adult, kind of like my first congregation, which you know well. But God revitalized that. And, you know, when I went to my first church, Grace Baptist in Albemarle, we were running 70 to 80. When I left, we were running 130 to 140 in 3 years. So almost doubled and had younger. So we're doing the same thing. But even though I think my average mean is like 60 or 65, they have embraced the technology. They have embraced Zoom, and they would prefer to do Wednesday night on Zoom than to come back down to the campus
Yeah.
like they had been doing once a month. So that's helped in when we start really growing, we will probably go more Zoom related with our D groups, with our discipleship groups. So they're open to that. We've always live streamed, but because we are in the entertainment industry, just the size of our church, you know, before COVID, we were getting ready to hit the 200 barrier, and you know that's the most that is the hardest barrier to break. But we were getting ready to, because we are in such an entertainment driven area, and when you do things here, it has to be first class.
Yeah.
So with the size of church that we have to what we can do with technology, really we should be running over 700.
Yeah.
We just have a really good tech team, IT team, so we're really good. So you know, I haven't really been able to do as much with the discipleship as I want. So that's kind of what we're doing discipleship related wise as of right now.
That's interesting to say about with COVID, the senior adults being more able to Zoom and that kind of thing. I've thought moving forward about, we've done D groups here as well, and it's been a couple of years since I've led one since we've done them. And I've thought about, a lot of times the issue has been getting people's schedules to match up and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about, you know, you could do some D groups with 2 or 3 guys through Zoom, and now that everyone has been forced to adopt that technology, probably through their jobs,
Right.
we don't really enjoy Zoom and get kind of old doing it. Yeah, I think
Right.
that standard way of communication is probably going to stay a while, and that is a good idea of maybe doing more discipleship through that, because people are super busy even in this pandemic time, and you can carve out an hour interview or an hour discipleship session easier than having to travel somewhere and get together and eat and all that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
I've been with the 2 guys. They live here in the downtown area, so they literally can walk, and
Yeah.
they usually do when they do come here. They walk. They don't drive.
Yeah.
But just I mean Mondays. So usually at 2:00 I would do my D group, but I've moved them to Mondays. It just works better in my calendar for myself. But they like doing Zoom. Hector, he's the one who's 30. He's extremely busy. So with his company that he's running, he's usually Zooming while he's driving.
Yeah.
And then the other one, his name's Andrew. He's either here in the office and I just rotate the computer screen around, or he's zooming in. So everything that you have to do with discipleship, you can do on Zoom.
Yeah.
It's just getting the people used to it. One way that we've actually helped with our people, especially being an older congregation, is we're actually doing tech classes on Sunday afternoons after church. So we just had our first tech class. It was about as basic as you could get. How do you turn on your device? You know, where do you go? Our church website is dbo.church, you know, but because of that, someone who had not been on our Zoom Power of Prayer hour on Wednesday nights was on Zoom last night after preceding the tech class. So, we're having our pluses. So, but yeah, I think Zoom's going to be with us for a while, and it's going to be, well, it's not going to be with us for a while. It's just going to be the new operating procedure, and people are just going to have to get used to it.
Now, y'all opened back up. When did y'all open back up, and how did that go?
We started regathering June 14th.
Okay.
And you probably experienced this as much as I did in preparation to regather between myself and my church administrator. We meetings, dealing with the county, with the state, with the Florida Family Policy Council. By the time we started to regather, I didn't want to hear anybody say Zoom.
Yeah,
I was
I was the
completely
same
done with
way.
Zoom. I mean, I was worn out. I mean, I'd get off. I mean, I had one that lasted 2 hours, and I thought, man, I was thinking to myself, shooting myself in the foot would feel better than this. So we did that. We had a regathering team that met to go over the guidelines that we, as a staff.
Yeah, we got some problems with Scott, but if y'all are watching, you just bear with us here, and we'll see if he gets back on. Oh, there you are.
Hey, sorry about that.
Oh, you're
So
breaking
it
up.
hasn't messed up too much of the recording. All right, hold on just a moment.
We'll be all right. Maybe you
All
can.
right. Hey, let me, I hate to have to stop the recording. Let me kind of log out and log back in on another computer, and I think that'll help. Give me just a moment.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, Scott changed his computer, so his new setting. But anyway, we're having some internet issues. But anyway, he's back on. So anyway, resume what you were saying, Scott, about I forgot what we were talking about now, but you might know.
Regathering. Well,
Yeah,
we were regathering. So I switched from my MacBook to my iMac. I have a theater screen I'm looking at now.
nice.
So in regards to regathering, we had a team. My staff came up with some guidelines using CDC guidelines and also the protocols that were issued here in Orange County from Mayor Demings, who is the mayor of the county. We met, they kind of went over that. They added their comments or their thoughts in it. We readjusted, gave all that out. So we started to regather back on June the 14th, and it's worked out well for us. According to Rayner, he was saying that most churches probably, if they started to regather or when COVID is over, that if they can get 25 to 40% of their congregation back, that they'll be ahead of the curve. Well, we're in the 60% range right at the moment. So
Good.
we're near like 110 of about 200. So
Good.
what, 55%, I guess. So, God's doing really good on that. So we're thankful there. So
Yeah, when we first started, we were at 45%. We're about 70 now. And but we're just now starting to see some of the young families come back as school gets back in, and they realize that the schools aren't going to be shut down with virus outbreaks. They've started to come back and everything. And of course anyway, but we've been going on and thankfully we've been blessed that we haven't had any kind of outbreaks or anything like that. So Orlando, you're saying is very entertainment based, and so you do feel the pressure to do everything really well. And we've heard this for several years now as church leaders about how everything needs to be done excellently, but really in Orlando that is a big part of it. Yeah
it really is. First Baptist Orlando, and especially with our church and a lot of our people having ties, it is very much driven by a sense of excellence. And so that's a good thing. I mean, if you're needing things in your church and let's say you need new furniture, well, you don't want somebody's old furniture out of their house. And our church family's not going to do that. So they'll spend the money, and of course you have to ask for it, but they'll do it. So, which is a good thing because I've been in enough churches and you probably have experienced it yourself. I mean, you don't want grandma's sofa. I mean, you sit on it, you're liable to have to go to the doctor after you do. So yeah, there is a high sense of excellence here, and that's a good thing. The downside of that, it costs money. Yeah. So people have to be willing to give.
Awesome. Now, Scott, you have one son, Aiden. How old's Aiden?
He just turned 9 the end of August. His birthday is August 31st.
Just turned 9. And what people may not realize is Scott's wife, Rika, went to be with the Lord 3 years. Is it been 2?
Four this November.
4 years ago. And she had cancer. And so Scott's a widower. and he's still doing ministry, and he's since changed since that, because that would difficult to pastor at the church where your wife was, and so that's one reason the Lord led him to Orlando. So, would you want to give a little? Advice is not a good word, but as people grieve and deal with that, it obviously it'd be unusual for pastors to go through that, but there are. I heard a pastor the other day who lost a child, and so pastors do go through tragic situations, and maybe some advice to pastors who are going through some tragedies, and even if it's not something as intimate as a wife, just some advice. You don't necessarily, you might need to take a break from ministry, but don't necessarily have to leave ministry. And just talk a little bit about what has helped you.
Yeah, back in 2009, we lost our daughter. We had a miscarriage, so I have experienced that. But never having held the child, it's hard to associate feelings with that. But my wife was dealing with cancer. We didn't know it was cancer. Back in 2010, she had the first operation in March of 2012 to remove the tumor. And the tumor was both benign and malignant. So it was spreading all this time, and we had no idea.
Mm.
So medical malpractice there. And then the tumor was removed again 23 months later in February of 2014. Tumor started growing again where the drain port was, had it removed on July 31st, 2014. And, we just thought since it was benign, or that's what we thought. She said, I don't want to be cut on anymore. I'll just let it be. It's not bothering me. And then in late April of 2016, we found out she had stage 4 cancer. Should I have Alzheimer's? I'll never forget it. So it was carcinoma metastatic expleomorphic adenoma cancer, an extremely rare cancer. Only 3% of the people in the world will have anything like that. So, after she passed, I know you and Emily couldn't come up here for the service, but I came to you guys and spent about 4 or 5 days with y'all. Yeah. So that was like right after. Mm-hmm. So let's see, Thanksgiving had just happened, and then I came down to Moncks Corner. So went to church with you guys and just spent time. Probably the one thing that helped me is you do need to have time. I didn't really have a lot of time because I had a son to raise. And so I didn't really have a lot of time to process what I was thinking and what I was feeling. Mm. So the only time that I was able to process that was when Aiden went to be with his grandparents. And then on those weekends or whatever, that's when I could cry it out. Mm. And it's not also too, you might need to see a biblical Christian counselor. So in my hometown of Hickory, North Carolina, we had a really great one, Dr. Steve Shores. And only went to him twice. I was falling apart, couldn't figure out what was going on. Wasn't sleeping. Aiden was sleeping in my bed. And just after the first visit, Steve figured out what it was. He goes, "You need sleep." I mean, I'd go to my office after I dropped my son off at school, go in my office, open up the office at church, and I'd sleep 4 hours, and I just felt tired all the time.
You're just
working Aiden
didn't have to grieve about it, right?
Just say that one more time.
You're just pouring your life into work.
I was pouring my life into work and into Aiden. And so, and that's another thing too, I'll mention. So Steve figured out, he goes, "You just need sleep." So when Aiden got out of school that year, I made him start sleeping in his bed. And it was amazing. Within 2 or 3 days, I felt like I had all the energy in the world. Oh, yeah. The other part of it too that I was dealing with, and I didn't figure it out until about March. And I didn't figure it out. My sister-in-law told me, my brother's wife, I couldn't remember things. One thing that my wife Rika always admired me was that I had a steel trap for memory. Yeah. I never kept up with a calendar. I had one, and I would write the event in there, but I would never refer to it again. I could just remember it. After she passed, I couldn't remember anything. Whole conversations with individuals I could not remember. They would come up and say, "Hey, Pastor, we talked about that." I could not remember it at all. I'd look at them. I was like, "I don't remember having that conversation with you." And my sister-in-law said, "Well, no wonder." And I said, "Well, what are you talking about? No wonder." She said, "Not only are you having to do your job, but now you're having to do everything Rika did. You're having to be a mom, and now you're having to take care of Aiden. So your mind is coping with just the major things in life. So from that, I've learned focus on the majors and don't worry about the minors. They'll work out, you know. So I've learned that. One thing that I did go through before I came here, my home church did grief share. And instead of going through that as a participant, I went through it as a leader. And by the time I went through that, I was already 2.5 years in since she went home to be with the Lord. And that was probably one of the best things I did. The first year when your spouse dies, you're just trying to figure out how to function as a human being again. Scripture, we all know that the Bible is true, but to live it, I can definitely say that it is. When the Bible says in Genesis, the two shall become one, God meant that.
Yeah.
So I felt like I had been amputated, you know, from the head all the way down to my feet. So, I mean, it was almost to the point I had to teach myself how to take a shower, how to brush my teeth, how to get dressed in the morning, how to go out and to go grocery shopping, which I'd done before.
Yeah.
But I had to learn life over. Rika and I started dating in February of 2000, and she went home to be with the Lord in 2016. We were married 14 and a half years, but had dated and everything 16 and a half.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, almost half of my life.
Yeah.
So that was difficult, but grief share helped because I was able to really put words and systems and pictures with what I had experienced, and that helped. So, also having good friends, being able to call you up, being able to call other people. The other thing, the greatest thing that I had was my father, my mentor in the ministry, pastors my home church. Every Tuesday I would meet with him, and I knew that when I spoke with him, I could tell him things that only I would speak with Rika about. And that's been the most difficult thing, is not having someone to really to communicate with.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, ladies, if you're watching, I'm speaking, but so this side of it, one thing I never thought I would ever have to do was, you know, to date. I never thought I'd have to do that again. And so I've been on some dates, you know, so that in itself opens up a whole other can of worms, I guess, so to speak. Not in a bad way.
But people that you're the pastor of a downtown Baptist church, that might be difficult to get past.
Yeah, it is, you know, and so people are different now. I mean, you have to do these dating apps. And all I gotta say is Christian mingle is not Christian. That's all I'm saying. So so don't go there. But you know, so one thing I would tell guys is have one, or have a person, another man, another pastor in the ministry, that they will let you speak to them about anything. And then have time set aside to where you can process your feelings and emotions, because you're going to do it. If you don't, you will break down before your people in the pulpit. I never did that. I never had that happen. But had I not, I took a month sabbatical. They actually would have given me longer if I asked them, and they actually said, "Pastor, do you need a longer time?" I said no, and I actually came back. I think I came back after about 3.5 weeks.
Yeah,
I couldn't stay away that much longer. I probably should have taken longer. I probably should have taken 2 months. Just because she died on November 18th. We had our homegoing service on November 21st. My birthday was the next day on November 22nd. That was a Tuesday, and Thanksgiving was on November 24th. So I had all that hitting, and I went through the motions of the holidays that first year. And the first year is not the roughest. The second year is the roughest. But
I'm going to ask you about this then, about just a little bit about changing ministries, and the Lord, you know, led you to a different ministry after her death. And I was thinking that's probably, I mean, obviously it's the Lord doing it, but if we take him out of the equation, it's probably not a bad idea to do that, just because talk a little bit about why you think that's a good idea.
Um, well, you know this. I've spoke to you about it. So back in July of 2017, a church in my home state of North Carolina opened up, and my home pastor said, "Hey, do you want to pastor that church?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And but what he didn't realize I was dealing with was that every Sunday that I was sitting there in worship, I would see her casket sitting there at the altar.
Mm.
It was just a ghostly reminder of what had happened. And there
Yeah.
were times when I was preaching, I remember looking down. There was about 2 times I remember looking down, and it was like I was looking down on top of her with the casket open.
Yeah.
That was hard. I mean, it was like every time I walked in there to have church service, I mean, I just wanted to cry,
Yeah.
and I didn't. There were times during the songs I'd get emotional, but when I got to the pulpit, the Lord took care of that.
Yeah.
I think it's 1 Timothy 4, the passage that Dr. Heisler gave me, talking about that the Lord stood with me, when we preach that God is standing there with us. So he was the one who got me through those times. So I talked to you. I talked to Dr. Don McCutcheon, who used to work for the Baptist State Convention of North Carolina. I spoke to Johnny Hunt, and I asked Johnny. I said, Johnny, do you think I'm crazy or anything? I said, for leaving a church, and this is my reason why. And Johnny Hunt looked right at me, and I had spoke to several other men throughout the Southern Baptist Convention, well-known pastors, and Johnny said, he goes, Scott, he said, I've heard a lot of reasons for guys wanting to leave a church, but he said that is the absolutely best one I've ever heard. He said, you leave. He said, if anything, he said, I believe God wants you to move. So just took prayer. So that was in the summer of 2017, and nothing opened up until the summer of 2019 when I came here. So it was probably the best thing. I needed that shift. I needed that change. I needed to get away from everything going on, to be away. I know this sounds bad, but to be away from family.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and also too, the other side of it too is that when God does bring a new lady into my life, I don't want them to feel that they're having to live in the shadow of a ghost. So that was in the process of me coming to Orlando. Didn't realize I was going to come here. I just remember in December of 2018 we had an early snow, and I said, Lord, I'm done with the cold. Now I went to Appalachian State, so snow skiing was in my blood, and I skied a lot. But I said, Lord, I'm done with the cold. I said, move me somewhere warm. I said, if you open up, move me somewhere warm. Hello, Florida. But yeah.
The pastor's going through grief, or he's lost a child, or even a wife, and of course that does happen with ministers, especially ones that stay in ministry for a long time. Don't feel guilty if you feel like the Lord's calling you elsewhere, and especially with being a widower, there may be some worry that some men have. Well, churches might not hire me as a single guy, and you just have to realize, hey, listen, the Lord's in control of this, right?
Yeah, and I had a lot. I had a lot of churches that turned me away. And I'm not talking to small churches. I'm talking large churches. And I would call you, you knew this.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's several prominent churches, and I'd get up there, and they just wanted someone married,
Yeah.
And I mean, we're talking churches over 1,000. And I was like, okay, fine. I said, that's what, I mean, I didn't take it as a slap in the face or as a personal insult, but that's what they felt the Lord wanted them to do. So
Yeah.
that's fine.
And we can talk a little bit about the biblical standard of that being anything. It's more of a preference, probably.
It is. Yeah. There's nothing biblical. I mean, hello, look at the Apostle Paul. Look at the Lord Jesus. I mean,
Right.
good grief,
That's right. That's right.
Uh,
Well, that's
so
very good. Listen, we'll share this on Facebook and YouTube, and hopefully, if you know some pastors who are going through a time of grief, that they can just hear from Scott. Because I know Scott sometimes probably felt like you're the only one that's ever been through that before. And now it is a rare situation, but it probably helped you to know that there have been other men who had been through it, and that God will certainly get you through it.
yeah, several prominent men. David Allen, preaching professor out of Southwestern, his wife died unexpectedly.
How about this? As we get ready to close here, how about if you have pastors watching who have friends going through something like this, or something tragic, or even maybe going through a divorce, maybe, or anything like that, what not to say to these men? Because pastors, a lot of us we try to fix things, and sometimes you just have to listen. So what not to say?
Very good. So when I was going through this, I remember someone saying, "I was like, Pastor, I just don't know what to say." And I looked at him and said, "I didn't ask you to say anything. I just want you to listen."
Yeah.
So you just need to be there to listen. You need, and the main key thing is be available. Be available to them in their time, because they're going to need somebody. They don't need you necessarily to say anything. They just need you to listen, and listen takes more of an active approach than speaking
Yeah.
does, because sometimes we speak mindlessly.
Yeah.
And that the other part of it too, having done a lot of funerals, and you've had your fair share, and we've all said it at a graveside, Lord, give them the peace that passes understanding, give them the comfort. But to have actually experienced it,
Yeah.
now I know. So when someone is dealing with the death of a wife or of a husband or a child, I don't have to say anything. I can give a look, and I don't know what that look looks like. They just tell me that they know, and they know that their pastor
Yeah.
knows what they're going through.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I can't remember the account where it is in the gospel, but it said that Jesus looked at them lovingly. I was like, what's that like? Well, I kind of experienced it because I've lived it. So,
In many ways, what you're saying is, and I was thought about this earlier, is you can be more effective in helping your members grieve because you've experienced a lot of things that they're going through.
yes, I would not have. I didn't want to learn it that way.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
I didn't want to learn it that way, but my home pastor has even said that.
Yeah.
So it is. Yeah, I have a new appreciation, or a better appreciation of what people are going through,
Yeah.
because I have experienced that. But also at the same time, I have a better appreciation of kind of a renewal of life, because now I'm in a new season of life, and
Yeah.
so it has its own excitement, about it now. It also has its own concerns, but it has its new excitement. So, but just really the main key thing for pastors who are going to watch this: be available and just listen. Just be available and listen. They don't need you quoting scripture or making a statement or that, because we're liable to say something crazy or not intelligent. But just be available and listen.
Good.
Something unintelligent, you can put another word there.
Very good. Very good. Well, Scott, we're going to wrap up. Anything else you want to tell anyone, just any pastor who's watching this now, who's facing the uncertainty of COVID and moving forward? And I saw that horrible article about how so many pastors are thinking about quitting. And
Yeah, I got on Facebook, read that, and then I gave you credit without stating your name. I said, hey, a friend put that on there, and
but I think what he was trying to make people happy, and we know you can't do that, and really, you really can't do it now.
no. First off, as Christians, we're not guaranteed happiness, but we are guaranteed joy.
Amen.
But with pastors, is just, hang in there. This won't last long. You had put a thing on Facebook, and I was joking, but it is a pandemic, and I don't mean it from a political standpoint, but this is in God's plan,
Yeah.
and so this season will pass. Nothing is forever. The only thing that's forever is Jesus and this heaven, and we're going there. Stay true. Be true to what God has called you. I remember going through a hardship. I asked you, is a calling for a season or for life? And I remember you this was back in 2014, and
Yeah.
you said it's for life. They said you can't get out of it. So for those of you, if you're going to drop out of ministry, let me just give you some harsh love. You're going to step out of God's will. Stay in God's will.
Yeah.
It might be rough in this season, but glory is on the other side. Just stay true to what God's asked you and called you to do and commanded you to do. Preach the word, and preach it with power, but preach it with love. So that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, that calling might look differently, but it's not. It doesn't leave you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it does look different. I mean, I had a whole idea of how ministry was going to look here,
Yeah.
but because of COVID, and we don't even know what ministry is going to look like post-COVID. And we don't even know when that's going to happen, hopefully in 2021. But, so we're all going to, it's just, again, focus on, major on the majors and forget the minors. Just forget it. Just forget it. That's it.
All right, Scott, listen, we appreciate it. And we'll be posting a link to his church Facebook page and his page as well. And then we'll share it. And if you know some pastors that need some encouragement about some things, make sure you share this and let them listen. All right. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Charlie.